Well, I'm actually going to probably build on some of the discussions that we've already had across the day, but also in this session. And our focus is around integration. So it is, again, a little bit around software, but it's around the integration of software. So we started this project probably 2 years ago. The DG very kindly popped a few million in my pocket and off we went. And we identified very early that the number of experts that were required was significant and very broad. But we all viewed this problem very, very differently. So off we went. We identified that we needed to have a consistent message, and our consistent message was quality and standardisation and consistency. So we have become known for underpinning everything we do around quality. Our vision was a shared oncology record, so a single oncology record for all care providers, Medonc, Radonc, Allied Health, Nursing, and also our administrative and our MDT teams. We were adamant that there had to be, as a minimum, evidence. If evidence wasn't available, standards, and if we didn't have standards, it had to be a consensus. So you can imagine that that has actually probably expanded some of the time frames in which to implement, because something couldn't come in because you just liked it. If you liked it, you actually had to get consensus from your colleagues. And we're talking across 4 sites with 11 regional sites, so a total of 15 sites that had to have agreement if there wasn't evidence. Evidence was the easiest path, so therefore people became very proactive in their ability to seek out evidence and present that to us for inclusion in the software. So as I said, our focus has been on integration. So Mosaic is the enabler for us. Our demonstration project is across Bundaberg, Hervey Bay, Rockhampton, and the satellite site of Rockhampton, Gladstone. For those of you who aren't aware, Queensland is a geographically dispersed state. A new statistic coming my way is that it's the second largest state that is not a country in its own right in the world. So I was just saying to a colleague, it takes me just as long to fly to Cairns as it does for me to fly to Sydney for the day. So flying is a regular occurrence in my agenda. So our focus sites, as I said, were Rockhampton, Gladstone, Bundaberg and Hervey Bay. So Mosaic, as we have said, was the enabler. We had an interface with demographics, so I'm sure all of you here that work with software know the significance of the patient administration system and integrating with that and having that as our source of truth. These were our key sites. Our first go live was September last year, and that was focusing on practice management, so referrals, appointments, capturing activity for all outpatient services, such as allied health, nursing and medical. From there we expanded to integrate with our tertiary quaternary service. So one of the key elements that we were focused on is that our regional centres had interconnectedness with a tertiary service. In Queensland we're graded from basically 6 down to 3, and then we have multi-purpose centres. So our services here at this point in time were a level 4 service, and they needed integration with a level 6 service. But we also acknowledged that we actually needed to integrate with our level 3 services, our smaller remote and rural services, which are level 3 or multi-purpose centres. So telehealth has been paramount to our success. Just to add a little bit of extra flavour to the mix, we undertook a public-private partnership at Rockhampton Hospital for radiation oncology services, and we have them on a single instance of Mosaic. So there is not a separate instance of Mosaic. We have a single oncology record. That has been our mantra from the beginning and continues to be our mantra. Moving forward, we have in Queensland Health I call it very technically the bucket. It is the viewer, and what that does is it houses all of the discharge summaries for inpatient care, and we are now moving to integrate key pieces of information from Mosaic to... that didn't work for me. So thank you. Key pieces of information from Mosaic to the viewer. What that will enable is that all clinicians who are part of Queensland Health will have visibility of the MDT summary, which Brett Fielding presented earlier today about, and also the specialist medical clinic letters. There is opportunity for us to include other documents as we move forward, but that's our focus in the beginning. Before Christmas this year, we will be implementing telepalliative care in the home. So that will be where our palliative care CNCs and nurses are taking iPads with Movies, or for want of a better, Cisco Jabber is the software, to the home. Our palliative care physician will be in Brisbane, and they will be seeing patients as far flung as Longreach, Winton, Buckhalden, and everywhere in between there and the coast. So we are quite excited about that. And we also have implemented telechemotherapy and supportive therapy. So that's where our patients have had their first treatment in our larger regional centres, and then their subsequent treatment, if appropriate, will be delivered in the smaller regional and remote centres. And that's underneath the guidance of the CIRCS, Queensland Chemotherapy Remote Supervision Guide. Oops, wrong way. And that. So our governance, as I've said, there needed to be evidence as the first step in everything we did. So we have a top-down, bottom-up approach to our governance and change authority. So we have a community of practice and a clinical management committee, which are the drivers for requests, evolution of the system, enhancements, and Brett Fielding is our system administrator, and then all the work comes to him. So he's a very busy man. And basically the structure goes up to if there's innovation or enhancements that can be undertaken that can be done with no dollar expenditure, then those decisions are made at that level, and really we only take dollar expenditure up to the chief executive level. So as I've said, standards are the cornerstone of what we have been doing for the last 2 years. We have used multiple frameworks such as the National Accreditation, EVIQ, the Optimal Cancer Care Pathways, and also adherence to MBS, PBS and the ICD-10 coding. So we, of the 15 national safety and quality health standards, we have utilised a number of these, and naturally we've used EVIQ. So for state, there's the Clinical Cancer Care Framework, the listed approved medications, the Queensland Formulary, the MDT meeting summary, which is a statewide approved form, clinical assessments, and we call it the MAC, which is the monthly activity collection, which basically equals dollars in the end, where it feeds to. So here we have the Queensland Clinical Cancer Care Framework. It's built from the National Service Improvement Framework. The Mosaic implementation has focused very much on the collation of diagnostics, the MDT workup and subsequent review and recommendations, the review and transfer, and then on to treatment. So as you can imagine, Mosaic is actually a electronic prescribing for both medical oncology and radiation oncology. We use it, in our instance, it's a paperless system. There is no need to sign. We have authorisation to use this as a full electronic system, so all ordering, dispensing, pharmacy checks, nursing checks and administration are electronic. Our local standards, each hospital and health services, so we're actually working across borders here, so you call them local health districts here, we call them hospital and health services, HHSs for short, but one and the same. They're all statutory bodies and we're working across multiple ones of those. So we have some, I've got to know the informatics, security and the cyber security team very well over the last 2 years and continue to do so as we adhere to those standards. So the corporate reference data sets, whilst they're not very exciting, very sexy, they have actually been a cornerstone for our future line of work, which is around the automating of our activity reporting. And that activity reporting ultimately feeds to both the state and federal governments. EVIQ has been our source for assessments, so the time out assessment was paper-based, and so we've had to, but we have built that into Mosaic as an assessment now, and that is completed at the appropriate points in time throughout chemotherapy administration. The pre-chemotherapy toxicity we have modified slightly at the request of the facilities, and we use the common toxicity criteria, so that was the evidence tool we used. The oral chemotherapy, we started with EVIQ, however that didn't have a complete assessment, so we have subsequently built that through the business reference groups. and that has ultimately been endorsed by the Queensland Nursing Education Reference Group. So IOIMS was the, EVIQ was the source for all medical oncology protocols. We had degrees of separation in this process, so that sometimes when you read and enter things you can't see the forest for the trees and you read what you think you see. So we had an expert actually exported in from New Zealand to assemble all the protocols and the order sets. We then had the IOIMS pharmacy QA, and then we had a separate team of medical nursing and pharmacy do the endorsement. This is the endorsement flowchart that was given to all participants in this group, so that they had very clear articulation of what their roles and responsibilities were. Each care plan was undertaken through a checklist, and each member of the team had to sign as their representative. And I've kept all those for audit trails. This is probably a slide very common to all of you here in the room around the sources of medication errors, and I heard a little bit about that this morning. Just before this afternoon. So as we know, chemotherapy protocols are toxic and there's multiple drugs. They're individually prescribed. This is what we were working with in May this year. I'll flip that quick. This is what we have taken away from the error cycle. So with our ordering, transcribing, dispensing and administering. The only two elements that remain outside of the automated process at this point in time is the labelling and the dialing up of the pump rate. So this is what a protocol looks like now. As you can see, here we are, you can see very quickly and very clearly when there's been an alteration in the drug dosage. So I'll wait for some photos. So that does make it much more tangible to look at. The recent publication of the New South Wales report did include, around off-protocol prescribing, did include prescriber guidelines. We meet all of those except for time to be given. As those of you who work in a day oncology unit know, for someone to actually identify a specific time would make scheduling very difficult to impossible. So it's not part of what we do. Not actual time like midday or 2 o'clock as opposed to the day all the time. So we can do days, dates, but not day 1 at 2 p.m, day 8 at 3 p.m. That's logistically not possible. So standardisation has many benefits, as I'm sure I'm talking to the converted. It enables meaningful data, information and ultimately knowledge. It adds value. So our project, whilst it's been tumultuous and it's been bumpy and it's involved a huge number of experts across the board, we have had great success in our ability to implement standardisation across a large number of sites. Thank you.